Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Welcome back to David Mackey's Shiny Side Out on freedomslips.com on the #1 listener-supported talk radio on the net. So push the donate button or subscribe to the archives for about $5 a month. It's via Patreon these days. Everything seems to be going that way. And, you know, jump in the archives and subscribe to those too. It's much better. Get yourself some merch. Have a listen to all the other shows, and if you're following Shiny Side Out, David Mackey Shiny Side Out, if you're following that on YouTube, do comment, like, and subscribe. Just asking you that for us. Next, we'd like to welcome everyone who is new to Revolution Radio, or to Shiny Side Out for that matter. And if you're interested in interviewing either Mackey and I for another show, or just, make contact with us. If you have any questions, make contact with us. You can go through the website. We have a website, shinysideout.net. Well, look, Mackey and I have, we've been doing this now for some time. This is show number 474.
470 and 400.
And this is the second hour of a 2-hour show that we have, and we break them into 2 segments. First segment is news, and the second segment is our show arc. And today we're continuing our discussion on biological weapons, and this is part 4 in the series. And if you want to catch up to episodes 1, 2, and 3, please do. You could pause it here and then come back to it if you're listening on YouTube. But otherwise, you'll find it on the prior, I think, 4 or 5 shows going back in time. All right, in the archives on freedomslips.com. Mackey.
That's my name. Well, actually, it isn't. But I'll say it is.
But that'll do.
That'll do.
That'll do. Yes. Mr. Schneerib.
And if you don't like it, I can change.
Oh, wow. Mackey, I know that you and I both are flabbergasted that we're still doing this. It's 474.
Yes.
For everyone, maybe for the new people, you should go and have a listen to our 100, 200, 300, 400 shows. Because we have... we sort of smoosh it all together, and there's a lot of commonality about what we talk about. Each one of the separate, you would think separate show topics aren't. They are interwoven into each other, and there's an overall message that you can find when there's not it's not that interpretation of the Bible when there's magic numbers in there, I swear, right? No, this is about finding what does join all of this together, and you'll get a bigger picture, Mackey.
Yes, look, that's right. I mean, but it joins this together is an agenda that has been running for a long time. I don't want to put years on it, but it's a lot longer than anyone has been around. Mm-hmm. any regular person has been around. The funny thing is this: since you brought up the overarching theme. I listened to, I think it was BBC News. When I go for my little runs at night, I go usually between 11 p.m. and midnight. I go out for a run because that's when nobody's in the street and I can do my thing, right? So I was out there listening on my headphones to BBC Radio. And this is actually, that will spark off the conversation and we can get into the show context. But it's important that I say this before I forget it. There's a study that was done on worms. Now, these worms are very simple worms. They're the most simple worms you can think of. They've got only a handful of neurons, and you can see all their cells. So all the biological functions that you can see that are happening in human bodies, you can very readily see in these worms because the DNA is very similar to ours. What they found is you make a couple of changes in the DNA, they extended the worm's lifespan tenfold. Okay, tenfold. Now, these very same changes you can make to the human DNA, and it would play out in very much the same fashion. So when we talk about longevity, and I'm going to bring this up when we have another show cycle, especially the hypothesis. If you extend this to human things, imagine a lifespan tenfold what it is today. So instead of living to 100 years, which is a good innings, anyone will agree, you live to 1,000 years. But who's to say it'll stop there? Okay, so the overarching message here is that we've been in this system of things for a very long time. Willingly or unwillingly, I do not know. I know why we are here, but I do not know why we are here. If you follow the hypothesis, this will become clear. Now I can tell you exactly why we're here, what the reason for it is, right? I don't know why that reason is any good. I don't know why anybody would need that to be the case, right? And if you know anything about quantum physics, then you probably know why I'm going with this. But ultimately, though, what we are experiencing today as the COVID-19 pandemic, let's call it that, yeah, that's part of the overall machinations of the plan. This is part of the plan. We have been talking about 2020 for years. For years. For you know, and we also said it'll probably be something biological. Okay. Now, no, we're not prophets. We're just good researchers, and we try to tie together the facts as we see them. We have seen patterns in the past, and there's no reason why the patterns of the past shouldn't repeat as patterns in the future, and that is happening right now. Initially, I was skeptical, Dave. I'll be honest with you. I didn't want it to be. I didn't want it to be true.
We didn't want it to be true, and we didn't think it was going to go down the way it did. We were hoping it wasn't. Sorry.
Yeah. And so when we started this show cycle, because this show we did for the first time at the beginning of 2020. All right, and we were talking about. I'll tell you, what is this? Oh, here we go. I think a few 10,000 people. Yeah, seven. Okay, there's an article here from February 1, 2020. The real number of coronavirus cases is more than 75,000, according to a scientific model that says the outbreak will double in size every 6.4 days. That's when it just started, February 2020. Fast forward to about 3 or 4 weeks ago. Coronavirus cases 126 million. Deaths 2.7 million. Of course, we now have gone across the 3 million mark. Right. But my point here is that this is very much the event we thought might happen. And while the death rate, as horrific as it is, isn't at the level of the Black Death or Ebola or anything like that, the effects it has on society, on our psyche, on our economy.
It's the worst thing since 1920.
Yeah. I mean, living memories, there's probably hardly anyone left that remembers anything as bad as this.
You'd have to be 100, and you wouldn't be remembering much. You would have been a child, yeah.
Probably not. And this is really the thing that we're seeing here now, right?
But it helps make your brain fade, or brain fog is actually one of the symptoms.
Yes, that's correct. You're 100% correct. It is, absolutely. But there's another insidious thing that is connected to this pandemic and the way this virus works. There's a study that Dave shared with you last week, and I think I mentioned it the week before, talking about male fertility. So there was a study done, and this is January of 2021, and there's a second study of February 9, 2021. This was written by Rachel Redner, and she is the senior writer for who is this? Who did we take it from? Let me see. Here we go. LiveScience.com. Okay, so these are official websites. These are studies that are being done. Don't expect your doctors to know this. The doctors that I know don't know this because they just don't have the time to look after it, right? But Dave, what does this study? Does this? By the way, this is the second study we're sharing with you now. Okay, we've shared the other study, which was conducted by what was their names? Here we go. Here you go. By Behzad Hajizadeh Maleki and Bakhtiar Tardibian, a PhD of the Justik Lubik University in Germany and the science department, sports science department at Urmia University in Iran. So this is German-Iran study, the initial one, and this is the second study we're sharing with you. What are they telling us, my friend?
Yeah. So this is COVID-19 may lower sperm counts. Small study finds by Rachel Redner, senior writer, February 9th, 2021. The effect may be temporary experts said. Men who have recovered from COVID-19 may be at risk of developing low sperm count, at least in the short term, a small new study suggests. New to the other one that was a month earlier. The study researchers from the University of Florence in Italy analysed semen samples from 43 men aged 30 to 65 about 1 month after they had recovered from COVID-19. They found that 25% of the men had low sperm count and nearly 20% had azoospermia, or the total absence of sperm in their semen. That's much higher than the prevalence of azoospermia in the general population worldwide, which is around 1%, according to Johns Hopkins School of Medicine. Moreover, participants with serious COVID infections, those who were hospitalized or admitted to the intensive care unit, or ICU as we know it, were more likely to have azoospermia after their infection. Remember, that's the absence of sperm entirely. Compared with those who faced less serious infections, according to the study published in February 1st in the journal Human Reproduction. However, the researchers stress their study doesn't prove that SARS-CoV-2, the virus that causes COVID-19, harms sperm. The researchers don't know what the men's sperm count were before their infection, so the authors can't say for sure if the counts decline post-infection, but all of the men with azoospermia had previously fathered children, which means that they had at least some viable sperm in the past, the report said. In addition, it's possible that some of the medications given to treat COVID-19, such as antivirals, antibiotics, and corticosteroids, could affect the sperm counts. Being sick in general may have an effect on semen. The sicker you are, the more effect it can have, says Dr. A.J. Nangia, professor and vice chair of urology at the University of Kansas Medical Center, who was not involved in the study. I'll take it up to the COVID heading. Dr. Bobak Barucham, director of male fertility and microsurgery at Lenox Hill Hospital in New York City, agreed. This may not be specific COVID phenomenon and may, and is probably likely, be due to these patients having a more severe illness and requiring intensive care. Barucham told Live Science in an email. Nangia added that these men need to be followed for a minimum of 90 days after illness to see if the effect is long-lasting, because sperm takes several months to fully mature. You would have had to repeat the study on these people at the 90-day mark to know if the effect is prolonged, he said. Mickey?
Just to be clear, the study that was undertaken before had twice the number of people in it, plus 100 men strong control group. So this is a slightly smaller study. Now, what does it say about COVID-19 and fertility then? There's reason to think that SARS-CoV-2 could affect sperm production. Testicular cells have high levels of the ACE2 receptor, which allows SARS-CoV-2 to get inside cells, the authors say. However, only a handful of studies have looked for SARS-CoV-2 in semen from men who tested positive for the virus. Those studies found the coronavirus in semen from some, but not all of the men during the infection or recovery. At least one other study from China, published October 2020 in the journal 𝐫𝐞𝐯 Medicine, has found lower sperm counts in men who had COVID-19, but this small study just included 23 patients. So I wonder then, so this is me talking now, why they're not referring to the study we mentioned to you earlier.
Yeah.
It was taken as a collaboration between Germany and Iran. And I think that's because it was taken as a study between Germany and Iran, and the people that are conducting these studies maybe haven't read it. right? That's my suspicion. It might not have been published in English, potentially. I don't know. I don't know. Okay. Now, of the 43 patients for this particular study, though, 12 were treated at home and 26 were hospitalized and 5 were admitted to the ICU. Overall, 8 men had azoospermia and 3 had oligospermia, or low sperm count, defined in the study as less than 2 million sperm per milliliter of semen. Men are generally considered to have low sperm count if they have fewer than 15 million sperm per milliliter. So that's very, very low, according to the Mayo Clinic. The risk of azoospermia was linked to the severity of the man's illness. Azoospermia was found in 4 out of the 5 of the ICU patients, 3 of the 26 hospitalized patients, and just 1 of the non-hospitalized patients. Just 1 participant had SARS-CoV-2 detected in their semen, suggesting that the occurrence of virus in semen is a rare event. After recovery, the authors wrote. The researchers also found that 3/4 of the participants overall and 100% of the participants admitted to the ICU had high levels of interleukin-8, IL-8, an immune system molecule and marker of inflammation in their semen. COVID-19 patients of reproductive age should undergo a careful follow-up for reproductive function and semen parameters, the authors included. So what we're seeing here, the author's conclusion is there's enough evidence to warrant a follow-up and to see how you're recovering, or if there's in fact an effect on your fertility if you're planning to have a child. Now, is this a temporary effect? Just as me talking again here, a lot of severe diseases, including the flu, can cause the sperm count to lower. It's a part of getting fevers and it's infections. So that can happen. But what they're saying here is Nagia said that based on the current study and other previous research, there appears to be at least a temporary effect of the illness on the testicles and sperm. In the short term, it looks real. Nangia, who is also a urologist with the University of Kansas Health System, told Life Science. However, the big question is whether the men's sperm counts will increase over time. Is it a persistent, irreversible effect? We don't know. Kim said he's not convinced that patients who have been infected with COVID-19 necessarily require prolonged follow-up to analyze their sperm. But we clearly need more data and experience dealing with the aftermath of COVID. And so more follow-up will help to better define which patients are most at risk for negative reproductive effects due to COVID-19, he said. Certain viral illnesses are known to have a long-lasting effect on fertility. In particular, mumps can lead to inflammation of the testicles, known as orchitis, which can result in infertility in some cases. Nangi noted there have been some reports of men with COVID-19 experiencing testicular pain similar to what's seen in mumps. Although the new study is one of the largest to date to look at semen quality after COVID-19, it is still relatively small, so more studies are required to confirm the findings. But again, no reference is made to the study that Dave mentioned to you last week. I find this fascinating. Now, why are we spending so much time looking at the effects of COVID-19 on male fertility? Well, the reason we believe this pandemic is happening is twofold. One is to, the key reason is to stop the awareness cascade, ascension or rapture, what do you want to call it? I don't care what you want to call it, right? I'm not a religious guy, but that's what we think. And in order to do that, we needed to do one of two things. One, lower the relative frequency level of I guess, the human race, put us into a state of fear, more or less.
That's
and secondly, and secondly, reduce our numbers significantly.
Yeah.
Because I believe that if you apply the Fibonacci sequence to human population numbers, you will come, and you correlate those then to dates, years, as it were, you will come to significant events in the human race's history. And 2020 was one of those Fibonacci sequence numbers, 7.76 billion. And that's why we picked 2020 as being a significant year and something would happen, and it did. Now, we lost 3 million people. That's horrendous. Clearly not enough to depress the overall birth numbers. Mm-hmm. There are other effects, though, as well, the knock-on effects. So we don't know how many people died because of the pandemic. And I don't mean directly died because of it, but we have now people that might not have received the proper medical care because the health system was simply overloaded. We might have people that suffered more than normal because they're poor and economies are crashing. So the death rate, the suicide rate, the starvation rates might all go up. So the
secondary effects, yes.
Yeah, secondary, 100%. So the 3 million might be, I'm not saying it is, but it might be tens of millions of people that have actually lost their life directly as an effect of this particular pandemic or plandemic, if you like. But the other thing here, as well as the longer term effect of this virus, is to potentially to reduce the birth numbers going forward. Now we will not know this until, I want to say, 5 to 10 years down the track when we look at the overall births and deaths. And if there is in fact an effect that this virus has on male fertility, then we can see that that we will see it play out in reduced birth numbers. Interestingly, though, there's two interesting factors here. One is the clotting that the disease itself causes, right? That's one. The secondary one, though, is the clotting that the vaccines seem to cause.
Yeah.
But only in young women, or predominantly in young women, right? Which is also very interesting. So the virus seems to take care of male fertility, or so it seems, and some of the vaccines seem to take care of young, healthy women in the negative sense of taking care of. I mean, they're being done away with. So that's why we're spending so much time on it, to look at the effects of this virus as an overall effect on the human race and the overall plan that has been put in motion by the parasitic layer, if you will, of our reality structure. Okay, and I also wanted to bring up the importance of the microbiologists that have been killed over the last 20 years. And once we get to that, you will see why we do that. Because if you were to do something like this, right, and you've got all the time in the world, really, right, to do it, plan for hundreds, maybe thousands of years, maybe longer, you do it well. And you do it in such a way that you make sure there are as few obstacles in your path as possible, and you do anything you can to guarantee your success. Now, having said that, we also must understand that the parasitic class does not have total control of all of us. Not yet, anyway. They do not. So they still have to tread lightly. They still have to work behind the scenes. And in my opinion, Dave, there are only very few of those entities. Okay, not terribly many, as far as number is concerned, right? So it's not like they could overwhelm us by sheer force of numbers. It's more likely to be the opposite. Which brings me to the next point as well, because of the biologists or microbiologists that have died. There's some interesting work that was done comparing HIV and SARS-CoV-2, right? Because a lot of the people, or quite a few of the microbiologists that died or were killed, and I mean were killed, were also HIV, leading experts in HIV AIDS research. So Dave, why don't you take us through the HIV SARS-CoV-2 comparison? Yeah,
so they had to plow the road, is the term with a military jet, to clear the way. To plow the road to make this a thing, because you can't have a whole bunch of people out there making who could get in the way of this idea, right?
Yes.
All right, so this HIV/AIDS specialist explains its similarities and differences to COVID-19. So how similar are the two, HIV and SARS-CoV-2, CoV-2? A few recent studies on the effects of HIV and SARS-CoV-2 indicate that they do have similarities, some similarities. Shanghai-based researchers provided evidence that SARS-CoV-2 can infect T lymphocytes, the same cells targeted by HIV. Other researchers have documented that individuals with severe COVID-19 may exhibit lymphopenia, or an atypically low number of lymphocytes in the blood. Likewise, HIV infection results in this abnormality eventually causing the immunosuppression associated with AIDS. But these findings should not cause you to assume that SARS-CoV-2 is like HIV.
However, the research paper the above is based upon has been withdrawn. Okay, so let's just go through that for a second here. Novel coronavirus attacks and destroys T cells just like HIV. And the article that we just wrote out to you was from Forbes, www.forbes.com, Forbes magazine. So this, in fact, is the actual study, okay? And this was published April 13, 2020 by Angela Betsaida-B, Laguipo, BSN. And the immune system has many components that work together in protecting the body from foreign invaders. One of the most important types of immune cells is T lymphocytes or T cells, a type of white blood cell that acts as the core of adaptive immunity, the system that modifies the immune response to specific pathogens. Notice, this is the notice that it came from newsmedical.net. The authors of the research paper that this news story reported upon have retracted this article. So the Forbes article, right, that we just shared with you, has based its content on the research paper that was retracted. After the publication of this article, it came to the author's attention that in order to support the conclusions of the study, the authors should have used primary T cells instead of T cell lines. Additionally, there are concerns that the flow cytometry methodology applied here was flawed. These points resulted in the conclusions being considered invalid. All authors agree with this retraction. So the comparison that we just saw between HIV SARS-CoV-2, the paper itself was withdrawn. Now, the similarities between certain aspects of HIV and SARS-CoV-2 remain. They remain though, right? And microbiologists with expertise in HIV research, even world-leading experts, have been dying like flies for the last 20 years. Therefore, and much to my regret, we must journey through a mirror darkly, Dave. And here we're going to start talking about the deaths of the scientists, starting, in fact, in 2002. And this article was compiled by Alana Mitchell, Simon Cooper, Carolyn Abraham, and the overall article was compiled by Alana Mitchell, and it was published May 4, 2002, Dave.
Yeah, all right. So Saturday, May 4, 2002, it's a tale only the best conspiracy theorist could dream up. 11 microbiologists mysteriously dead over the span of just 5 months. Some of them world leaders in developing weapons-grade biological plagues. Others, the best in figuring out how to stop millions from dying because of biological weapons. Still, others, experts in the theory of bioterrorism. Throw in a few Russian defectors, a few nervy US biotech companies, a deranged assassin or two, a bit of Elvis, and a couple of Satanists, a subtle hint of espionage, a big whack of imagination, and the plot is complete, if a bit reminiscent of James Bond. The first 3 died in the space of just over a week in November. Bento Q, 52, was an expert in infectious diseases and cellular biology at the Miami Medical School. Police originally suspected that he had been beaten on November 12th in a carjacking in the medical school's parking lot. Strangely enough, though, his body showed no signs of a beating. Doctors then began to suspect a stroke. Just 4 days after Dr. Q fell unconscious, became the mysterious disappearance of Don Wiley, 57, one of the foremost microbiologists in the United States. Dr. Wiley, of the Howard Hughes Medical Institute at Harvard University, was an expert on how the immune system responds to viral attacks, such as the classic doomsday plagues of HIV, Ebola, and influenza. He had just bought tickets to take his son to Graceland the following day. Oh, there's the Elvis connection. Police found his rental car on a bridge outside Memphis, Tennessee. His body was later found in the Mississippi River. Forensic experts said he may have had a dizzy spell and have fallen off the bridge.
He fell, Dave.
He fell.
He fell onto 1,000 knives. Really? Oh, what a coincidence.
Just 5 days after that, the world-class microbiologist and high-profile Russian defector Vladimir Pasechnik, 64, just fell dead. The pathologist who did the autopsy and also who happened to be associated with Britain's spy agency concluded he died of a stroke. Oh, that magical stroke, Mickey.
Natural causes.
Yes. The victim, who defected to the United Kingdom in 1989, played a huge role in Russian biowarfare and helped to figure out how to modify cruise missiles to deliver agents of mass biological destruction. The next 2 deaths came 4 days apart in December. Robert Schwartz, 57, was stabbed and slashed with what police believe was a sword in his farmhouse in Leesburg, Vancouver. Is that Vancouver?
Yeah, it is.
His daughter, who identifies herself as a pagan high priestess, and several of her fellow pagans have been charged as sword-related. Dr. Schwartz was an expert in DNA sequencing and pathogenic microorganisms who worked at the Centre of Innovative Technology in Herndon, Vancouver. 4 days later, Nguyen Van Set, 44, died at work in Geelong, Australia, in a laboratory accident. He entered an airlocked storage lab and died from exposure to nitrogen. Other scientists at the Animal Disease Facility of the Commonwealth Scientific and Industrial Research Organisation, or CSIRO as we know it, had just come to fame for discovering a virulent strain of mousepox. I remember that story. Which could be modified to affect smallpox. Then, in February, the Russian microbiologist Viktor Korshunov, 56, an expert in intestinal bacteria of children around the world, was bashed over the head near his home in Moscow. 5 days later, the British microbiologist Ian Langford, 40, was found dead in his home near Norwich, England, naked from the waist down and wedged under a chair. He was an expert in environmental risks and diseases. 2 weeks later, 2 prominent microbiologists died in San Francisco. Tanya Holzmeier, 46, a Russian who moved to the US in 1989, focused on the part of the human molecular structure that could be affected by medicine, infected best by medicine. She was killed by fellow microbiologist Gang Matthew Hung, 38, who had shot her 7 times when she opened the door to a pizza delivery. Then he shot himself. Sounds like a love affair, Mickey. The final 2 deaths came 1 day after the other in March. David Wynne Williams, 55, a respected astrobiologist with the British Antarctic Survey, who studied the habits of microbes that might survive in outer space, died in a freak road accident near his home in Cambridge, England. He was hit by a car while he was jogging. The following day, I'll let you do what does it mean. The following day, Stephen Mostow, 63, known as Dr. Flu for his expertise in treating influenza, and a noted expert in bioterrorism, died when the aeroplane he was piloting crashed near Denver. Mickey, my only thing is a statement that comes up a lot with one of my friends and I is in Russia, it's usually the polished floors and the open window. Wrong accent. Right?
Yeah, close enough.
What are you doing? Can I come on? So that's the common way of going. But as we're reading, what I'm hearing here, the classic car accident, hit by another car which you never found, the shooting, anyone can shoot two people and place the gun in someone else's hand just to get rid of them, right? All of these things are classic deaths in the history of whodunits.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So what does any of this mean?
So this is just the tip of the iceberg, but what does it mean? Now, statistically, what are the chances? One that a prominent North American microbiologist reached last night at an international meeting at infectious disease specialists in Chicago. Janet Shoemaker, Director of Public and Scientific Affairs of the American Society for Microbiology in Washington, D.C., pointed out yesterday that there are about 20,000 academic researchers in microbiology in the U.S. Still, not all of these are of the elevated caliber of those recently deceased. She had a chilling final thought. When microbiologists die in a lab, there's a way of taking note of the deaths and adding them up. When they die in freakish accidents outside the lab, nobody keeps track. Now, there's more though, right? So in fact, 2001 to 2002 saw, like we said, a number of suspicious deaths, and here we are again, and adding a couple as well, and then we're going to continue the list. In fact, no, we've got that. Actually, you don't have to do that again because it's the same. Yeah, we have named them, so that's good. Okay, so it's just. I mean, 𝐫𝐸𝐴 said he died in an airlock filled with nitrogen. It's just odd. It's odd. Anyway, now the interesting thing is this, though. But wait, there's more. SSO can be accused of many things. And in case you don't know, SSO, that's us, the shiny side out. But skimping on information is not one of them. Okay, our show notes, if anything, are probably too information rich, as it were. It's a lot to digest. It's like drinking from a fire hose. The above list that we've just shared with you is already alarming in its own right. But it's actually only a sub-list in a much longer list of dead scientists, and specifically microbiologists and doctors. And I'll share a few here with you, and then Dave can take it and share a few, and so on. April 15, 2000, Walter W. Shervington. He was an MD. 62, his expertise, he was an extensive writer, lecturer, researcher about mental health and AIDS in the African American community. And he died of cancer, which is, that could be probably a natural thing. July 16, 2000, Mike Thomas, he was 35. He was a microbiologist at the Crestwood Medical Center in Hurstville. Circumstances of death, he died a few days after examining a sample taken from a 12-year-old girl who was diagnosed with meningitis and survived. Obviously, he died. December 25, 2000, Linda Rees, 52. She was a microbiologist working with victims of meningitis. And she died 3 days after she studied a sample from Tricia Zylo, 19, a Fairfield, New Jersey resident, who was a sophomore at Michigan State University. Tricia Zylo also died, and she died December 18, a few days after she had returned home for the holidays. May 7, 2001, Professor Janusz Jelczewicz, and he was an expert in staphylococci and staphylococcal infections. His main scientific interest and achievements were in the mechanism of action and biological properties as staphylococcal toxins, and included the immunomodulatory properties and experimental treatment of tumors by propionibacterium. November 2001, Yakov Matzner, 54. He was the dean of the Hebrew University Hadassah Medical School in Jerusalem and chairman of the Israel Society of Hematology and Blood Transfusions. He was the son of a Holocaust survivor. He was one of the world's experts on blood diseases. Okay, and what is SARS-CoV-2, Dave? It's a blood disease. Including familiar Mediterranean fever, FMF. Matzner conducted research that led to a genetic test for FMF. He was working on cloning the gene connected to FMF and investigating the normal physiological function of amyloid A, a protein often found in high levels in people with blood cancer. And how did he die? Professors Yakov Matzner and Amiram Eldor were on their way back to Israel via Switzerland when their plane came down in a dense forest 3 kilometers short of the landing field. So it's a plane crash. November 6, 2001, Jeffrey Paris Wall, 41. What was he good at? He was a biomedical expert who held a medical degree, and he also specialized in patent and intellectual property. Circumstances of death. Mr. Wall's body was found sprawled next to a 3-story parking structure in his office. He had studied at the University of California in Los Angeles. Of course, the inference here is that he jumped. November 12th, 2001. Dr. Benito Quay, we've already mentioned him, so he's just one of the many. We also mentioned November 16, 2001, Dr. C. Wiley, one of the foremost microbiologists in the United States, just to reiterate that again. One of the foremost. Dave also mentioned Dr. Vladimir Pasichnik. Okay, circumstances of death. The pathologist who did the autopsy and who also happened to be associated with Britain's spy agency concluded he died of a stroke. However, details of the post-mortem were not revealed at an inquest, in which the press was given no prior notice. Colleagues who had worked with Pasechnik said he was in good health. Okay, so let's just be a bit dubious here about his cause of death. We've mentioned Dr. Schwartz, okay, and Goin Van Zet, who died in Australia. We've mentioned him. January 2002, Ivan Glebov and Alexei Brushlinsky. They are 2 microbiologists, and both were well known around the world and members of the Russian Academy of Sciences. And Glebov died as a result of a bayonet attack, and Brushlinsky was killed, not died, was killed in Moscow.
I've done a little bit of biology. I don't know what part of my body is called Moscow.
Well, the part that kills you. January 28, 2002, David W. Berry, 58. He was the scientist who co-discovered AZT, the antiviral drug that is considered the first effective treatment for AIDS. And he died unexpectedly of a heart attack.
Yeah, that old heart attack.
Wait, there's more, Dave.
Yeah, there is. So February 9th, 2002, Viktor Korshunov, 56, expert in intestinal bacteria in children all around the world, bashed over the head near his home in Moscow. Ian Langford, 40, expert in environmental risk and disease, cause of death, found dead in his home near Norwich, England, naked from the waist down, wedged under a chair. Ian was, without doubt, one of Europe's leading experts on environmental risk, specialising in links between human health and environmental risk. February 28th, 2002, Tanya Holzmeier, we mentioned her.
Yep.
𝐫𝐞𝐯, 38, also mentioned. He was meant to have shot her as a pizza delivery. Crazy. March 24, 2002, David Wynne Williams, 55. We mentioned him as well.
Yep.
All right. March 25, 2002, Tiven Mostow, 63. Yep. November 12th, 2002, Benty Q again. Carlo Urbani, April 2003, 46 years old. A dedicated international respected Italian epidemiologist who did work of enduring value combating infectious illness all around the world. He died in Bangkok from SARS, severe acute respiratory syndrome. No, don't need to say that twice. The new disease that he had helped to identify. Thanks to his prompt action, the epidemic was contained in Vietnam, so it remained an epidemic, not a pandemic. However, because of the close daily contact with SARS patients, he contracted the infection on March 11. He was admitted to hospital, and he died less than 3 weeks later. June 24, 2003, Dr. Leland Rickman of UCSD, 47, a resident of Carmel Valley, expertise and expert in infectious disease, who helped the county prepare to fight bioterrorism after September 11. Circumstance of death, he was in the African nation of Lesotho with Dr. Chris Matthews, the director of university's Owen Clinic for AIDS patients. He was also of the UCSD. Dr. Rickman had complained of a headache and had gone to lie down. When he didn't appear for dinner, Matthews checks on him and found him dead. The cause has never been determined. It's too late now. July 18th, 2003, David Kelly, 59, British scientist and authority on biological warfare, employed by the British Ministry of Defence, the MOD, and formerly a United Nations weapons inspector in Iraq. He came to public attention in 2003 when he had an unauthorised discussion he had off the record, there's no such thing, with a BBC journalist, Andrew Gilligan, about the British government's dossier on weapons of mass destruction in Iraq was cited by Gilligan and led to a major controversy. In fact, didn't John get stood down, the Prime Minister, as a result, or found guilty of whatever it was?
No one's ever found guilty of anything, my friend.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, it was determined that they went to war without any evidence at all.
It was all a lie.
Yeah, all a lie. Kelly's name became known to the media as Gilligan's source, and he was later called to appear on 15th of July before Parliament, blah, blah, blah. He was questioned aggressively for his actions, but he was found dead 2 days later.
It was ruled a suicide.
Of course, that's right.
Now, his expertise, though.
Yeah, biological warfare, weapons specialist, senior post at the Ministry of Defence, an expert on DNA sequencing when he was head of microbiology at Porton Down, and worked with 2 American scientists, Benito Q and Don Wiley.
Oh, we know those? Yes.
Yes.
Keep going.
Both others dead. Helped Vladimir Pashnik, who founded Regma Biotechnologies, which is a contract with the US Navy for the diagnostic and therapeutic treatment of anthrax.
Now, Pashnik was also killed.
Yes, he was. All of them were killed. Mm-hmm. Circumstance of death: he was found dead after seemingly slashing his wrist in a wooded area near his home in Southmore, Oxfordshire.
Okay. So
wow.
Again, this is the research. This is the value. We don't just read out stuff to you guys. This is the read. So hopefully you see the value here. But so this Dr. Kelly, David Kelly, you probably remember him in the whole weapons of mass destruction disaster. But the microbiologists we mentioned earlier, Benito K and Don Wiley, that he worked with very closely, were killed. He helped Vladimir Pashnik to found Regma Biotechnologies, and he was also killed. And then he was found to have committed suicide, which was massively disputed by his family, by the way. So yeah, there's nothing fishy here, Dave. Nothing funny. Move along.
Nothing to see here. Move along.
Nothing to see. Keep going.
All right, October 11th or 24th, 2003. Michael Perich, 46, expertise, LSU professor who helped fight the spread of the West Nile virus. Perich worked with the Eastern Baton Rouge Parish Mosquito Control and Rodent Abatement District to determine whether mosquitoes in the area carried the West Nile virus. Interesting. Circumstance of death, Walker Police Chief Elton Burns said Sunday that Perich of 5227 Riverbed Bend Boulevard, Baton Rouge, crashed his Ford pickup truck about 4:30 in the morning on Saturday while heading west on Interstate 12 in Livingston Parish. Perich's truck veered right off the highway about 3 miles east of Walker, flipped and landed in rainwater. Burns said Perich, who was wearing his seatbelt, drowned. The cause of crash is under investigation, Burns said. Mike is one of the few entomologists with the experience to go out and save lives. Robert A. Wirt, Chief of Entomology at the Federal Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, said. Wow. November 22, 2003, Robert Leslie Berghoff, 45, expertise. He was studying the virus that was plaguing cruise ships until he was killed by a mysterious white van in November of 2003. Circumstance of death. Berghoff was walking on a sidewalk along the 1600 block of South Braeswood when a white van jumped the curb and hit him at 1:35 p.m. in the afternoon, Thursday. Police said the van then sped away. Berghoff died an hour later in Memorial Hermann Hospital. That's a hit.
All of these are hits, or most of them are hits. So look, there's plenty. By the way, everybody, there's plenty more. We'll share quite a few more with you today, and then more next week. But this was still in 2003, by the way. Okay, and I've got another 30 pages of show notes here, just to let you know. And it keeps going. It keeps going in the same vein. But look, yeah, why don't we just keep going then and see how far we get?
Yeah, so we've got 5 minutes left. Okay, January 6, 2004, Dr. Richard Stevens, 54, expertise, hematologist. Hematologist analyzes cellular composition of blood and blood-producing tissues, e.g. bone marrow. Circumstance of death. Disappeared after arriving for work on the 21st of July. 2003, a doctor whose disappearance sparked a national manhunt killed himself because he could not cope with the stress of a secret affair. A coroner has ruled. Mm-hmm. The coroner ruled that he was having an affair. That's not a cause of death. Coroner should stay out of that. 2004, January 23rd, Dr. Robert E. Shope, 74. Expertise, an expert on viruses who was the principal authority of a highly publicized 1992 report by the National Academy of Sciences warning of the possible emergence of a new and unsettling infectious illness. Dr. Shope had accumulated his own collection of virus samples gathered from all over the world. Circumstance of death. The cause was complications of a lung transplant he received in December, said his daughter Deborah Shope of Galveston. There's a song in Galveston. The Dr. Shope had pulmonary fibrosis, a disease of unknown origin that scars the lungs. We now have identified lung scarring to do with a lot of viruses. Mm-hmm. Very interesting. January 24th, 2004, Dr. Michael Patrick Kiley, 62. Expertise, Ebola mad cow expert, top of the line, world class, is the statement. Circumstance of death, died of a massive heart attack. Coincidentally, both Dr. Shope and Dr. Kiley were working on the lab upgrade to BSL-4 at the UTMB Galveston Lab for Homeland Security. The lab would have to be secure to house some of the deadliest pathogens of tropical and emerging infectious disease, as well as bioweaponized ones.
Isn't it odd when within a day of each other, those two guys...
Two people...
Right?
Die. Yes.
Right? I mean...
What did they know?
I don't know.
What did they say no to?
What did they say no to? But the thing is this... See,
what instruction did they fail to observe?
Or what questions did they ask?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So, look, I don't know, Mike. But look, all I can say is I know we're running out of time today, but the list is much, much longer. Let me just mark where we are.
I'm going to do that.
And just so everybody understands, it's one thing to dismiss everything that we've just shared with you over the last hour as complete coincidence. I mean, you can, of course you can. It makes your life a lot easier, and I wouldn't blame you for it either. Mm-hmm. Right? But when you have that many people, and not just regular folk, but the top talent in these particular fields dying, and people that are working together, and people that had intimate connections to each other dying, because you can imagine that these people, they talk to each other, right? I mean, if somebody notices something and he talks to his buddies, even overseas, then all of a sudden, instead of getting rid of one person, you have to get rid of 4 people, or here of 2 people. And Dr. Kelly,
go ahead. While that sounds awful, it isn't to those people that
No.
need them gone.
It's a standard operating procedure.
Mm-hmm.
That's what this is, right? So, and by the way, so we're in 2004 now. We will go all the way through 2004.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, then we go to 2005. There's quite a few there. 2006, 2008, 2009, 2010, 2012, 2014. It's actually the MH17 crash.
Yep.
2014, there's a plague. So it goes right up until 2014 that we have followed up on these deaths. And there's the music. Don't go away, Joe Bear. I'm sure is coming up with an awesome show.
He certainly is, and he's in the chat room. You can talk to him while he's on here as well. This has been episode 474 of Dave and Mecky's Shiny Side Out. Take care, educate yourselves, and we'll see you next week for another Shiny Side Out on freedomslips.com.